5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0, ignition, liftoff.
You're listening to Relentless. This is the show for high performers who are driven and committed to being at their best. Nick Peterson and Jonathan Montgomery, co-founders of Relentless Dietetics, are your hosts.
Welcome to the Relentless Podcast. I'm Nick Peterson, hanging out today with Jonathan Montgomery.
What is up?
And the Dr. Trevor Cashy.
Hello.
There he is. As per usual, we're here to discuss getting a little bit better every day. What I want to talk to you guys about and tell our listeners is a conversation we used to have many, many times when we shared an office. And it just went kind of like this. Hey, Nick, Jonathan, Dr. Cash, I'm really hoping to compete in this race this weekend. And we say, cool, that sounds fun. Why don't you sign up and do it? And the response is usually along the lines of, well, so-and-so is going to be there and they might beat me and I'm just too competitive and I just don't want to compete unless I'm going to win, you know? No, I don't know, because it sounds like you just want to compete and want to win something. And Dr. Cashy said something one time, and Trevor, I don't know if you remember this, but you're just like, you want the truth? And they said, yeah, of course. It's what I'm here. And Trevor, you said, I don't think you're competitive. I think you're just being kind of petty.
You know, this was kind of a constant in the fire service. Who can tie the knot the fastest, but when the actual rope tech comes over, nobody wants to tie knots. But, I kind of think anytime you get a group of people together in a room that are fueled primarily by testosterone and some, hey, watch this, you're going to kind of run into this type of competitive versus petty scenario where everything becomes a measuring contest. Just nobody wants to measure when the actual competitors are there.
Competitors don't need to win all the time. They just need to compete, preferably at a high level. And we'll just kind of delve in today the difference between being a competitor and being petty.
We've all in life encountered those types in some kind of shape, form, or fashion. It may not always be as blatant as the I'm not going to run if there are better runners there, but you kind of tend to know it when you see it. Whether it's someone who's perpetually never ready or just always seems to be waiting for the right time to strike, or, my favorite, I'm going to make next year my year. We've seen, personally, people go as far as to cherry pick events that they know they can win by trying to track down the most literally obscure and arbitrary weight class or division so they can come home, compete against in a division of one and just bring home that bling. To me, it's just kind of sad. It's the exact opposite behavior of a true competitor, and I get it. Everybody wants to win. Why else are you playing if you don't at least want to win? Because there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But while winning is not the only reason to play the game, it's definitely an incentive to get involved and get on the field. But to me, I think the issue is when people that only choose to play when they know they can win and won't get involved otherwise, that's just not being competitive.
Yeah, I think that fixed mindset becomes dangerous because people that identify with the outcome, they identify as winners when maybe they are cherry-picking competitions that are easy to win. More importantly, and probably a little more insidious, is that the fact that they also identify as a loser when they don't win. And it's really easy to lose, say, oh, I'm a loser, and then identify with that.
That's true, man. And that attitude, it can really keep you sidelined altogether. Which not only guarantees you don't win, but also you never get the experience of really playing or learning or growing. And to me, that's a major downfall of that, choosing how you identify win or lose instead of choosing how you identify whether you get better or not. Carol Dweck wrote a pretty good book on the whole concept of fixed and growth mindsets. And in it, she references a phrase that kind of summed up that difference between, those mindsets, those that are really competitive and those that just, simply want to win. And the phrase is just becoming is better than being. And to me, that really resonates and drives home this whole concept of continually evolving and pushing your limits and striving to excel and not just always looking to win. It's people that actually embrace the journey and not just look at the destination or the process and not the outcome. And to me, that really is what it means and what's indicative of someone who truly is a competitor.
I can see like listening to this conversation and agreeing, and then going out to the quote real world and trying to identify the differences between these types of people and having it be difficult. But I think a lot of it more has to do with how you operate outside of competition more than how you operate inside of competition. And there's a big difference between needing to win and hating to lose. And a person that hates to lose will do whatever they can to not lose next time. And a person that needs to win will not do whatever they need to do to win in the context of getting better. It's the self-deception and being funky, like you said, with the way you choose competitions and picking who you hang out with and operating in a certain way to make sure you're always at a leverage point with whatever your population is. And that's not the same thing as hating to lose. That's really just trying to grasp at straws. So if you really hate to lose, you are going to do whatever it takes so you do not lose again. And by default, you are forcing yourself to expand in directions that are uncomfortable. And a person that needs to win refuses to put themselves into positions where they are uncomfortable.
It's a great point that you kind of point that out, like people that, you know, whether they need to win or they hate to lose, you know, because I've seen it in grappling sports where novices or beginners never step up to the intermediate or advanced division, or amateurs that never move to pros in a sport like MMA, where that progression is more obtainable than, say, the NFL. People that just sandbag and constantly compete at a lower level to increase their chances of winning instead of doing what it takes to step up. It happens all the time. And like you said, that's the difference. Do you need to win or do you hate to lose?
We've worked with some high level athletes and some true competitors. Even people that maybe haven't won gold every time are still true competitors. And their concern is, am I getting better every day? Can I avoid losing again? How can I improve upon this weakness? And they work towards it. They're just getting better every day. And kind of like Trevor and Jonathan just said, they're not cherry picking where can I win so I feel good about myself.
It's like correcting grammar.
Yes.
Like, I'll just leave it at that. Like, you need to be right, or do you want to learn something?
So pedantic.
So Trevor, you just touched on some of the differences outside of competition, and I think we can kind of delve into some other discrepancies between maybe competitive versus petty people, or just the, identifying ourselves even. And what I have seen personally, and it's mostly in sports, and you can be competitive outside of sports, but in the sports context, competitive, like truly competitive people, there is an ascension. They're ascending through levels of competition, whether it be from amateur to pro to all-pro to all-star, whatever it be. Generally speaking, there's an ascension, and they're getting better and better and better at higher and higher levels of competition. On the other hand, the people that we're calling quote-unquote petty often have rooms full of trophies and medals and all these things to tell themselves and the world how great they are, from the same exact competition over and over and over. Or maybe their weight class is going up every year, or their age or whatever, but there's not a ton of ascension. It's really at the same level or a lower level. And it kind of seems like they're doing whatever they can to make themselves all warm and fuzzy and maintain their I am a winner identity.
With RD, we kind of get to work with a lot of different people, you know, all sorts of goals and abilities and aspirations, whether they're professionals or the weekend warriors or, you know, my favorite competitive triathlete versus a career desk athlete. And it definitely runs the gamut. You know, and like you said, there's a difference between, you know, people that are trying to increase that skill level and get to that next level, and people that are just comfortable staying where they're at. And, you know, this does run basically the gamut in every facet of life, from sports to, you know, business to, you know, whatever, competing with your your siblings. But, a fairly glaring example that we often see that to me really illustrates the difference between the competitive and petty would be working with some of the strength athletes, the powerlifters, the strongmen that we work with. Nick and Trevor, man, I know you guys both have been at some pretty high levels in strength sports. Myself, not so much. I mean, I did bring home gold at the push-pull in the police and fire games in 1 year, but Al Bundy also scored 4 touchdowns and went on to sell shoes. So really, it doesn't really matter too much. But maybe you guys can have some insight here, having competed at those high levels, like why that is, why there are people that tend to want to push to that next level, and why people tend to just be comfortable cherry picking events and only competing when the time is right or when they can win.
I can't tell you why but it's there's a very clear discrepancy. Powerlifting's interesting. It's only 3 lifts. It's a bench, a squat, a deadlift. And I've been fortunate to compete at the highest level. And there's a clear difference. There are some serious competitors up there. And like you said, we've dealt with a lot of powerlifters that maybe identify as competitors, but they don't have the same mindset, the same attitude. And consistently amongst the highest level of competitors, and I think Trevor nailed it earlier when he said they just refuse to lose again, and they keep coming back at a higher level. Even if it's like, oh, tore my hamstring off, they will work their face off to get back into that same competition and do better because they don't want to fail again. I mean, the Dan Greens, the Kevin Oaks, those guys that I've talked to, they say, and they post recaps on Facebook and they talk about it, and it's always, was I at my best? Not, did I win? It's not, did I beat Kevin Oak? It's, was I my best today? And the people that are cherry picking are really concerned, am I going to win today? And that's the biggest difference I see in that sport.
It wouldn't surprise me if a lot of the guys who compete at that level really have no idea what anybody else is lifting during the meet. Everything they do is pre-planned out. And you hit those numbers, and if you happen to be the highest number in the room, great. And if not, do better next time.
Man, I think that kind of nails it. You have people that have dedicated most of their lives to a sport. These are people that are willing to lose their relationships, sacrifice their health, and damn near kill themselves trying to add pounds to their total. But they're trying to add pounds to their total, not necessarily win to beat someone else that day. They're trying to beat themselves, and on the other end, I think, you've got people that just think it's a lot of fun. They enjoy the training and they look at it as a hobby. Since we do get to deal with so many people on all ends of that spectrum in different facets of life, this sport in particular, I think, maybe due to its accessibility, it's pretty polarizing. It really gives that good kind of microcosm of the entire competitive spectrum. And to me, it's not necessarily between the hobbyist and the professional, but more so the line between a competitor and a competitor, as Trevor likes to say. It's just there's a glaring difference there.
In the context of strength sports, with my own experiences, I've interviewed, so to speak, people in other hobbyist sports as well, climbing, CrossFit, strongman, any hobbyist sport you can think of that doesn't really have a huge professional component that's at least endorsed by media. And it turns out a lot of the people that are in the competitor category may not be happy with their jobs, may not be happy with their home life, may not have something that they can identify with outside of their hobby. So what ends up happening is that in order to keep themselves feeling like they are kind of developing as a human and give some psychological satisfaction that something positive is happening in their lives, not necessarily that their lives are depressing, but maybe, like I said, crappy jobs can do a lot to a person's head, is that at the very least, at the end of the day, you can go to the gym and put pounds on your lifts. And that can provide a lot of psychological satisfaction that helps you feel like you're being productive when you otherwise may feel like you're being at a dead end. And when I speak with a lot of these people, there seems to be a lot of parallels there where people who put kind of undue focus on a hobby, it's as a distraction from possibly pushing themselves into uncomfortable areas in other parts of their lives.
That's a key point there too, is what are you investing so much of yourself in to create an identity to run away from, and why is it so important to win for you instead of just get better? And maybe that's that one area you think you can control, and it works great until it can't. It works great until you tear something off. And what's worse is you got people that tear things off trying to compete at a high level, and you got people trying to tear things off trying to avoid competing at a high level. And it's just an interesting kind of dichotomy there between people that are choosing to identify because it is a big part of their life, and people that are choosing to identify because they don't like the rest of their life.
Yeah, there's a difference between, like, I'll just say firefighting because your headphones are red. You can be a power lifter or you can be a firefighter that power lifts. That difference will tell you how fulfilling the person's life is outside of their sport.
Absolutely. And I think it's like the thing is, we've talked about it, and we got a guy sitting right here. We've got two guys sitting right here that did identify for a while in a sport so long till they got to the point where they no longer could, not because they didn't want to or they didn't want to win anymore. It was because physically just couldn't do it anymore.
Jonathan, when you say people tearing muscles off, people literally are tearing muscles off. I have both hamstrings, both pecs, and adductor. Like, I quit powerlifting because I truly am a competitor. I want to keep getting better. And for me to do that in that particular sport, I would have been crippled by the time I was 30. I think competitors kind of see life as an infinite game. It is just, they just keep getting better and better and better. There's not really an end goal necessarily. I quit strength sports so I could take that competitiveness, the need to get better, and actually improve other areas of my life. The truth is, I think Trevor and I could both cherry pick competitions all day long and win all the trophies. It doesn't make us any more competitive, and it doesn't improve our life at all.
I think for me, that's a key differentiator and an important takeaway is it's not necessarily the cessation of competition because you can't win. Because like you said, you guys could go find places where you could win, but it's no longer participating in an area or in a competition because you're at the point that you can no longer excel or beat your former self or get better, whether that's due to an injury or a life change or anything like that. You just can't get better in that space. Yet the drive to constantly improve, to get better every day, it's still stronger than ever. So to me, I think that's a big difference between making the choice based on facts and just picking up your marbles and going to another place where you can win. I think that's a key point.
If you're ready to get the body you desire without depriving yourself of the foods you enjoy, download your free diet playbook now at www.relentlesspodcast.com.
As a competitive person, I'm most interested in competing with myself and getting better. If my body was going to allow me to continue to do strength sports, and that's okay, I'm not in it for the trophies. I do want to win stuff, but I want to win stuff because I'm getting better. And that's why we focus on doing this podcast, helping other people, growing a business, because that's where we can continue to push and grow. And hopefully this podcast doesn't cripple me like powerlifting would have.
That would be a tough one.
Yeah.
My experiences in strength sports are actually positive for the most part. And I definitely wore, I guess, all three hats. I'd see if I could describe all three of the hats correctly. Is that I definitely had those periods in my life where, like, yeah, I spent like 10 years in a basement, with no windows, shooting lasers at green shit. And like, I don't know if Einstein really said this. I don't really think it matters, but like that whole definition of insanity thing, doing the same thing over and over. Yeah, that's what actual science is like. You trip and drop a sample, or you get shot in the eyeball with, 1.28 gigawatt laser. Like, at least I can go deadlift. And when I started to put a lot of focus into that, it improved rapidly. And it became really easy for me to put less emphasis on doing what I needed to do for my doctorate and more emphasis on what I needed to do to set records and win competitions, because that was easier for me. I could grasp it, and I knew that the work I put in, there's a correlation between work you put in and then what you get out of it. And science isn't exactly like that. Science, there's a little bit of dumb luck involved. On days I was bummed with that, I could always focus on training, and to some degree that's healthy. But eventually it's, I don't even want to go to work anymore. I just want to train. And that's where something ends up getting funky. That's one aspect of this. Another is that like most, I'll say the word fraternal, but like community-oriented sports, if you want to kind of act as a resource for people, in those areas, then having involvement in the community on a competitive level is key. By having high levels of competition under your belt, you do garner respect from other competitors. And if you wish to be a resource for them, then having that on your resume is important. So I had that aspect too, where I felt like I needed to compete at a high level to garner respect from the population that I personally wanted to work with. Keeping big boys healthy is important to me. And then lastly, I had the more pragmatic approach to competing, where if I want to compete at this level, I need to compete this many times, and I do need to win. If you do need to win, then you need to play the game to win. And then I guess the fourth one is I really just wanted to set this record for myself, and then did that outside of a regular competition. So there's a lot of facets to this, and I identify with all of them, particularly with the I'm not really happy in my life right now, but strength training is one thing that I do have control over, and there is definitely a positive correlation with input-output.
I remember I used to play in a band with a guy named Lee, and he wanted to be a tattoo artist. He was a phenomenal artist, but he hated tattoos. He didn't have a single one, and he refused to get one. And it's like, listen, Lee, I'm sure you could tattoo with the best of them, but I'm probably not going to get a tattoo from a tattoo artist that doesn't have tattoos. You probably don't want to take advice, like you said, keeping big boys healthy, from a guy that's never lifted a weight. I don't want a guy helping with my food that looks like chewed bubblegum. So I think that aspect of competition for you was important. But everything that you kind of keyed in on in your story there, T, was I wanted to achieve this goal, so I put the work in to do it. I needed this distraction, and I wanted to improve at it to kind of take my mind off other things, so I put the work in to improve on it. And to me, I think that's what kind of defines you as more of a competitor than, the phrase we use all the time, a competitor. And, we can look at it a bunch of different ways, but in practical application, the difference for me that brings out is just go back to powerlifting. It's what I know, right? You've nailed it before. On the end where you have the true competitors, where you and Nick fell on the spectrum, where the professionals are, and not even the people that set all-time world records, but the people that dedicate their life to it. These are the people that divide their year by the meets they want to compete in. They know they're competing 6 months from now. They'll set up an in-season and off-season. They'll train for it. They'll schedule their lives around it. Every meet, win or lose, they're going to challenge themselves to get stronger, put pounds on their total, look for bigger feds, find ways to compete against better athletes, whether it's a larger stage where the records have a deeper pool to draw from, whatever it is, they're looking to get better. And that's an awesome thing to watch. Someone that's so driven, meticulous in their approach to not just their day-to-day execution, but also with the eye constantly on how they're going to improve in the future. And as you said, that may mean not going for a max effort on their third pull, calling it all together because they want to be healthy 6 months from now during that next training block. And to me, that's awesome. In the middle, which is kind of the hobbyists you've mentioned, even, hey man, work's stressful, so I'm going to go lift as a release. It's just an outlet. It's fun. It's something fraternal, like you said, something to do with friends. May or may not even ever get on the platform to test themselves, but maybe they do set those gym PRs, they do a mock meet or whatever it is. The difference is they're 100% honest with themselves about it, and they're okay with it. They're not claiming to be, anything they're not. And honestly, I enjoy that attitude and that outlook just as much. I love coaching those people. The frustrating aspect, I think, at least from a support standpoint for me and probably you guys as well, is on that other extreme. With individuals who are just more concerned with winning than they are to putting into the work, into getting stronger, getting better, getting smarter, growing in the sport, whatever it is, whatever the space is. Instead of just training, working, competing, they're the ones that resort to those less direct methods to win. The cherry picking meets, waiting a year or two to compete so they can be in a different age bracket. I've heard that before. I'm going to wait till I can hit the Masters so I can grab a state record. Just all kinds of craziness, or my favorite, try to cut massive amounts of water weight to lower your class when really you'd be much better off just enjoying the experience and spending another year getting stronger. To me, I think that's not the competitive nature as much as it is a petty one. And I think that's kind of where that difference is. between the doers and the donors.
Yeah, I'll circle back around to Trevor's story, because just from, again, talking about practical application and being able to identify other people acting like this, am I acting like this? Everything, even though Trevor went through different phases, I did not go through different phases. I was all in. I want to be the best powerlifter in the world, and I completely ruined myself. But even through his different phases, all three phases were, how do I get better? How do I get better so I can win and have a track record here? How do I get better at deadlifting? How do I get better? Dr. Cashy I met before he was Dr. Cashy in Tunica, Mississippi at the National American Strongman Championship, which means he went seeking the best of the best. Even though he went through different phases and it was always about being better, at no point was it, how do I find competitions that are really, really easy so I can acquire trophies so people think I'm smart or good or whatever? And that's the big difference is, are you finding ways to get better, or are you trying to find ways to prove you're good right now?
I actually had a kind of like negative experience with that, where you do have to compete a certain amount of times in order to get qualified for a competition you want to be in. And I kind of got a taste of what some people may find as a positive, but I felt kind of gross. And that was when I showed up to basically a local contest to qualify for something else. And people were depressed that I showed up.
Yep. That's the ultimate, like, I can't
why
win
even
now.
Bother?
Yep.
You know, like, why even bother? Because they were right. I didn't belong there, but it was something I had to do to fulfill an obligation to qualify for something that was more relevant to where I was placed. So I can definitely see how that's something that's like stepping into a room and everybody being depressed you're in there because you're going to stomp them. But I guess that's just not something that I identify with, at least in the context of strength sports.
That is the, again, quote unquote, the competitors. Like, I showed up to compete, but Trevor's here. I don't want to do this anymore.
Yeah, I think the key thing here is just basically looking at yourself in the mirror, and asking yourself some of those tougher questions, man, to find out if you're currently capable of truly being competitive, and if that's even what you want. Not just when you're winning, but also when you might not be. Either you're not able to or just not good enough yet. When you're not winning, are you still able to get in the game? Still able to do what it takes to get better? Are you willing to do the work, invest the time, make the commitment so you can consistently improve? Or is it just something you do to, like you said, feel good? You're the second strongest guy in the ice cream parlor. If you have an obsession with winning, but not with getting better, then to me, there's a problem. Especially if that, obsession, quote, is accompanied by this constant search for the lowest hanging fruit to get those wins. To me, if that's the case, it might be seriously time to, reevaluate your approach, or at the least how you choose to identify, because you're not a competitor.
If you are not competing actively, if you are avoiding the game, if you're avoiding your race, if you're avoiding this competition, that's fine. Things happen. Things come up. Maybe the time's not right. But it's on you to realize it's not coming from a place of being too competitive. And you got to stop and recognize and ask yourself the questions Jonathan mentioned above. Just be self-aware. Are you competitive? Are you okay? Like, hey, maybe I'm not the best runner in the world, but I am a mom of 3 that also runs, like Trevor said before. Self-awareness and stuff.
I think for me, and I think for anyone looking to find these answers, it can really help her to define what competitive is to you. In your field, in your space, your sport, your life, what does it mean for you to win? Again, if you're a mom of 3, what does winning look like? Maybe it's not the gold medal at the charity 5K, but more importantly, if you do win, then what? Is it over? Is that it? You won? Or do you have an idea on what's next? Just, where do you find yourself not wanting just to win, but to indefinitely improve? Where is winning simply not enough? To me, if you can answer those questions, you've probably found a pretty great place for yourself in an area you can truly compete in for the long term.
I want to say, for the sake of argument, I would like to, I guess, posit the argument that even if you have this competitor syndrome and you have this obsession with winning versus the aversion to losing, you can still get to the very highest levels of competition. And many people do with this mindset. The need to beat somebody else versus the need to improve is still extremely strong. And for some people, it may work better in the context of how you place in a competition. The difference between these two people is really the psychological satisfaction they have. And one is where you can appreciate the self-improvement and understand how you can improve and get better. And the obsession to win is basically a road down a very dark path to psychological instability.
Yeah, I think the people that have that need to win, even when they make the highest level, are the ones that don't have very long careers because they lose, they freak out, they blame everybody else, they have meltdowns. They can make it to the top, but their careers are cut short.
I agree. You can get to the top with hate and coffee.
Hate and coffee was how I started running 5Ks, so I'm very aware of that.
You can definitely get to the top, but it's not a fun experience. And then if you start to try and convince yourself that you're not in this for fun and to feel good, then that's a totally different monster too, because those tend to go hand in hand. Is that you end up becoming proud of this masochism. So just something that like, yeah, you can still be the world's best and have the need to win. Like, I'm sorry if you are.
We covered a lot. We're running out of time here. Jonathan, like probably 5 minutes ago, if you just go back to that little, go back 15 seconds a few times, had some great questions that you should probably ask yourself. And Trevor has a word. I don't actually think it's a word, but I use it all the time. Take the time to self-awareify.
I don't see any reason to go any further past self-awareify. I don't think we can top that. So, that's all we got. Thanks for listening. And remember, if you really want to get better every day, it's always going to be a little bit more beneficial to be a competitor than a competitor because science or something.
Science. You've been listening to the Relentless Podcast. Now, if you've enjoyed this episode and you want to keep getting a little bit better every day, do us a favor, head over to iTunes, subscribe, leave us an honest review, and be sure not to miss the next one.
This is thepodcastfactory.com.